Chill here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Venus, our soul. Hey. And Venus is 20 degrees Scorpio, ascendant 16 degrees Sagittarius, and midheaven 0 degree Libra, ruled by Venus. The moon is 3 degrees Capricorn, and I woke up today with energy reading, but now I want to talk about this upcoming Neptune Saturn transit. And I talked about, for me, it's going to be the Neptune square. That being said, for people who are in their late 60s, okay, people who are in the 60s and people who are in the late 60s are still going to have the Neptune trine. And so I was talking about business and preparing for, when it comes to business, I talk about plan for sovereignty quite a lot. Okay. By the way, two shout outs. One is to Light Sefakan, and she's a reader that has been describing energy dynamics that happen in the astral realm as well, in energy realm. Those that come from me to her channel take into account that she describes the personal interaction part. She talks about organization, but she doesn't talk about the mundane stuff. And make sure that if you, let's say, separate from sibling or something like that, make sure that you listen to my readings, okay? Because those that are resonating with my readings are tapping into something that is on mundane level and changing economy level and so on and so forth. And you're going to need to make the composition of the internal dynamics, okay? I've had the privilege to take a 2 years break around the Me Too from my own parent, which was incredible crisis, but it also contributed to a lot of understanding in the relation. Okay, think about our families, our relationships, and just like there are recommendations to take a break even from marriage and so on, then that can be a founding factor, particularly for people that have been living really close with the relative. But that has been allowed by um, me volunteering for 5 years, and then after the Me Too, I was cohabiting, okay, with a person. Um, so, okay, so that's not always there for people, and people need to listen to both readings and take their steps accordingly. I'm open about this topic, okay, because it has been, after the Me Too, the generation that came before took time, and our generation, to be very honest, when it happened to me in academia, my parent thought that that person has no children, so he probably sees us as their children. That person may have been involved with something Epstein-like. Okay, so, and I say that with zero grudge or judgment. I just say that's how the world was running up until now, and the world is changing, so that's an opportunity to make the world actually accommodate for love, for relationships, for intimacy, for all the things that our predecessors did not know how to, because it's not that they did not know how to, because all they learned had to be with a bait, okay, or they could get assassinated for trusting someone, um, but they would also get assassinated if they didn't trust someone, okay, because they were surrounded with extortion cults, um, And for me, some of the people that greatly inspired me may have been involved in extortion cults. So that's my Neptune square. Okay. And um, yes, so and my other shout out, I give shout out to Light, and I give another shout, a big important thank you to people like Anneke Lucas, um, that not only her story and testimony, but her podcast that has been and is influencing my life greatly. And for me, it has been a healing journey, even if I wasn't physically trafficked as a child. Um, and I think together with channels like Light that set the record straight when it comes to the astral. I know I have been contacted about the astral in the past and astral experiences, both the good and the challenging ones. And I did not have a lot of answers on it because that was something that I need to conceptualize myself. And I'm very happy to see that there are resources that discuss things and just like PTSD was once, or CPTSD, or emotional flashbacks was once something that people couldn't even conceptualize, and they weren't able to work. They weren't on wheelchair or anything, and and that was affecting that was causing more people to try to unalive themselves, and then they would get into physical disability, and things that don't really help them. But this is something that now, a resource that exists out there. So in my previous video, I was talking from the business perspective and my journey in the last 3 years, where I noticed that I need to tend to the things that would affect my business growth, whether it's MK Often, MK Ultra, um, uh, the expectation that I will be informant if I want to open a business, the energy, the dark sorcery that's happening. Big shout out to Trudy Verstegen that explains about the stealing of creative energy by ritual torture. And those are very dark things. That being said, those things are done currently on wealth consolidation on natural resources. I'll get to the topic. It's a part of that topic. And those are things that are done as wealth consolidation on natural resources. Um, and in just 5 years ago, we would not have the terminology to say that, and, and people would not have the connection. I believe with my generation, with our Pluto square and Pluto and Neptune square, we come to confront. Okay, after the Great Resignation, a lot of people have been having their attempt at having their own business, and the thinking of the soulpreneur trend, and so the simplification of the bureaucracy around running a business, but also the simplification around all these manifestation techniques and dealing with the lower astrals, dealing with the banking system, um, okay, dealing with the fact that some of the people that have informed us on the great corruption that is needed to be tended to are having to participate in it. And it's our generation that opens the gate to difference. And at this juncture, some, for example, millennials right now, we have Gen Zers that have been setting the standard for what we got mental and physical disability over. And it's an entire generation that lived with wanting to unalive themselves. Okay, unalive is a very Gen Z word. Okay, I don't know if I can think about millennial words, but the fact that there's a generation where the most famous words are not no cap or whatnot, but unalive. Okay, they came up with the wording for something that my generation was struggling very hard to even have the discussion about without being buried outside the fence. Okay, I spent several decades, and still the generation after me just came up with a word for that. But set standards to the corporational world, where my generation would be expected to go J.P. Morgan Chase only to commit suicide at 30 something. Because not all people had a living parent that they could do all this entrepreneurship trial and error with. Okay, my mother had a try at her own business and the bureaucracy of closing her own business um, with fashion industry and and as an author and jewelry maker, and so um, I had leverage that most people, if they had that leverage, it came from families that were already in, uh, uh, you know, rubbing shoulders with people that rub shoulders with Epstein, let's say, in those circles. And um, and my mother was not. And that is something that only me, particularly at the decade after the Me Too, learned to understand that we're building generational wealth differently. And and then there are the people that of the new generation, whether millennials or Gen Z, that want to come out of the binding trust funds. And I really appreciate Albina. Okay, now I know um, Albina is coming from a culture where around every rich girl there would be a lot of women that were working ladies that try to come into the rich world. And I really appreciate Albina for painting a very honest picture of how divorcing an oligarch can look like, and how the power imbalance. But she also talks about even more important things um, for people that come within those wealth traditions, and that is that a child, and she gives a story of a child that went out of the family because they wanted to make their own wealth, they wanted to try and have their own hands-on experience at having a job. Um, and while Albina had a new money family that supported her having a job, because just her grandfather was working so hard and didn't get the luck, so her family was supporting of her, even though her mother was like, hey, you won't have to work. But the family was supporting her and her having a corporate job, whether it's for intelligence purposes, okay, or permeating another sector in the United States and so on. But it's also a privilege that she had, where if somebody wanted to go out of the family business and have a jobby job, and try their luck at making their own money and get acquainted with the working sector, they were banned by their mother so that they will not be able to have work in the entire country. Okay, so her channel is Privileged Few. For those that come to watch my channel and are either survivors of trafficking, at risk of being trafficked, and so on and so forth, high caution. Okay, when it comes to the privileged few, because she does she does come from a sector where working ladies were normalized and not much discussion over the ritual abuse and torture underneath. Okay, that type of trajectory. So that I don't want to cause deterioration in the psychological well-being of people, okay, that come from these particular sectors. But other than that, big shout out to Albina for bridging the gap between the where the wealth is, okay, and where the common people are. And those conversations, albeit they're different. I can see a video that normalizes trafficking might not even be aware that it normalizes trafficking by talking about how to be a mistress, and I was like, okay, unsubscribe, boom, okay. But there's also a part of the conversations that we are having and bridging our different cultures, different world creation, the problems that people came up with. Um, and um, and the fact that the world was running in a certain way up until now, and the venues, like even if I'm thinking about the Me Too, the venue to talk about sexual boundary violation at the workplace was not even there. Now, my mother knows that she had her own businesses because she wanted to be independent and because she didn't want to work for a sexually harassing boss. But when it happened to her daughter, she didn't understand because she thought that that person was probably seen as his children. And you can understand that there would, that there would be a reason to think that. Um, um, yeah. Well, at the same time, um, it is also the case that age gaps, even within marriages, were existing, and women used to sleep with her husband to buy new. Even my mother, that didn't marry, told me, I don't want to marry someone, I don't want to live with someone so that they will have to have sex with them for financial security. I don't want such arrangement. Now, of course, her daughter is only going to be more extreme to that line. And this was internal thoughts that weren't shared as a generational issue, but she had to deal with being a single mother and a single woman to a daughter that is entrepreneurial, that doesn't get along with the corporate job world. She makes daughter that makes revolution everywhere she goes. Even the person I was cohabiting, it was person that everywhere around it would be revolution. They liked revolution. I brought, they brought a revolution. I brought value together. If there was a narcissistic, let's say we were volunteering, and somebody was narcissistically bossing people, boom, throwing them out. This, okay. If something happened in academia and so on and so forth, they were like, oh, this is bitchonist, which basically meant I but I didn't know that. So they were happy that I'm going and making that revolution, and they didn't bother to tell me even what that entails. And anyway, I needed to heal myself, and everybody says you have to speak to heal yourself. You have to speak to heal yourself. I said okay, but and then there came a satire with a certain symbol that I did not know was also an IDF flag. Okay, so and then they thought to do to befriend the fraternities or whatnot, um, and then of course I'm going to be even more radical than their supposedly revolutionary circles. Okay, there's nothing revolutionary. The Bolsheviks were funded by Rockefeller. There's nothing revolutionist about the Bolshevik Revolution. It was just transforming the world from the oil from the monarch to the oil company. And yes, they had to provide for housing. Okay, Putin also corrects the infrastructure in Russia. Like if he tends to human rights better than another XYZ oil company, then he takes the revolution timeline. And that's and when we're thinking in those levels, whether it's business, politics, or whatnot, we have to think about the fact that people grow and change. And I talked about, for example, millennials having suddenly Gen Zers complementing us, where our spirit, when so much many of us are buried outside the fence, suddenly there's a generation that fights the battles that we no longer had the power to fight. Um, and and unfortunately, they're fighting their own battle in that. Um, and then there's the generations above us, okay? The ones that were having the Neptune trine. So I think Gen Z is about to have the Neptune sextile, okay? The Pluto sextile, hey. A Neptune, who's the Neptune? Because the last of the millennials are having their Neptune sextile right now. And beginner Gen Zers are having their Neptune. Wait a second. Neptune. Get the Neptune here. Their Neptune would be, if mine is here, then there would have last degrees of Capricorn, beginning degrees of Aquarius. They would have their Neptune sextile. And I think for the Gen Zers it's a blessing because suddenly all that they have been talking about is shown as not a conspiracy theory, and this is incredibly important. Um, okay, this is incredibly important. Um, but also the people that were born mid to late 60s are having their Neptune trine, which is another wave of healing. Now, it's not necessarily easy because there's crisis even with the trines and the sextiles. However, for many of these people, um, the opportunity to manifest and heal, albeit the ritual abuse that happened in the past, um, is forming now. And it is just us millennials. Some of it is Gen Zers, okay? So if you see at this time boomers, okay, flocking in with Gen Zers, um, then you'll see that there's a reason because they're both going through their harmonious Neptune aspects. And yes, so this makes a lot of sense spiritually, um, but then the Gen Zers will deal with when they come to their Neptune squares, then they will deal with um, the things that us millennials are dealing with from a more advanced point of view. So they will probably break even more glass ceilings. Now, um, this is a time where what us millennials are going through a crisis right now is something that, while it is a part of the crisis that the boomers are going through, it is also the evolution into remediating places that were isolating both them as generation but also them as people. Um, for example, I know that um, many of the people, when I was going through my Pluto square and now my Neptune square, which was dealing with how ritual abuse in the world affected my personal life and how adjacent it was, then us millennials sometimes deal with the astral aspects of that, and then the people that are even younger than us that have phrasing for that. But all these things that for us would be pseudoscience, while they would be hiddenly practiced against us. Um, uh, Even in academia. Okay, so I have the privilege of having been in academia, which is a conspicuous privilege regarding what happens in academia, but at least I know. Okay, so a lot of people that were not coming from, or their life were taking them in other routes, they may idealize academia, and whether it's business owners that think, oh, if I did that in academia, my patent would be protected. No, there would be dark sorcery to connect with your energy in the astral and then siphon your energy, sometimes using sexual boundary violation, and then get you to be sick or considered even crazy, and then use your patent in the most nefarious ways, under their name, or name of somebody else that was complying with their nefarious, cult-like agenda, and yes, and the people, and there would be no circles to protect you in that regard, because they would protect patents, but they would protect patents of people that rub shoulders with people that rub shoulders with Epstein, and that's not, hopefully, not your business, I hope. um, or is people that, whether they come from academia or not, okay, they weren't going into the um, uh, long-term research roads, and that perhaps could uh, give an ideation where, for example, the notion of particles as spiritual is something that is being looked into physics department. Probably several decades ago it wouldn't be, but now it is. And it is a blessing, because if we're dealing in academia with dark sorcery done against us, and we have dogmatic materialism to contend with and defend our theses with, which is the reason I took a break from working on my thesis in academia. Okay, it's like I would have to defend my thesis in the face of people that would be rubbing shoulders with people that are rubbing shoulders with Epstein, if not directly rubbing shoulders with Epstein, and have to explain to them the body-mind connection in epistemic view and the role of technology in bridging, okay? Kind of like an implementation of Larry Loudon. I made a thought experiment for a thesis. I was thinking I'm going to do a thought experiment for a PhD, and actually the colleague of mine that got accepted into I think, doing something like that. And he also came from philosophy of science, got killed um, around the 7th of October. And I'm like, when there isn't anybody that knows anybody, and I'm like, why him? Where are all the people that didn't believe me that I was going through because they were rubbing shoulders with Epstein? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't want them that. I would want them to die and then go and have their, healing in the, like Hitler, healing in the afterlife, and no suffering, just, just not to cause suffering anymore. And so, by the way, that I have to give a word of respect to the Israeli police. Yesterday, a pack of Arab-speaking people um, tried to um, possibly burn down our humble block, and the Israeli police actually did something. And thank you. I'm probably alive because of that. So I also say the good words for the police and not just the bad words. And I want to give a shout out to Caitlin Kapok and what's her perfume line? The perfume line, the Phoenix Lab, for the Deneb Al Gadi perfume, because I used that yesterday, and um, and I believe that that could have. Um, yes, I used that for other purposes. I didn't think about defending my house from fire. I was just using that because it was Deneb Al Gadi, and indeed the police were doing their job, saving us from basically being burned alive, and that's much appreciated. Okay, so shout out to Sphere and Sundry. Love the Deneb Al Gadi, and the fact is that this talisman was stolen from me, but I put part of the things I learned with that talisman is kind of like the Finnish way of preparing for the winter, and I put some of it in water, and and I had those water still left, um, and that actually protected my house from being um, burned yesterday. And I know that because the police is the one that stopped that, and then Al Gadi does bring the police in its favorable aspect. Um, so big thank you to Israeli police. Um, I know that I'm addressing all the things that are to do with corruption and are to do with targeted individuals. Um, and I'm also um, and I know that that puts not just me at risk um, when I do that, but I think that the job of policing forces is indeed to protect our safety from this type of protection tactics and targeted individual tactics, um, and I think that regaining and having that discussion and regaining trust and making the necessary changes um, is blessed for everyone involved. Okay, whether it's the salary of the police people, um, okay, that those of them that work tirelessly, and their ability to actually do something to save lives. So yes, much appreciation both to the Phoenix Lab, Sphere and Sundry, Kathleen Kopok, to turn talismans into something that you can put a little bit in a water bottle, and even if they stole the previous talisman, then that stayed, and that's really important. That's a part of the changes the benefic changes that are happening in the world. Um, Now, of course, those things, I know that some people don't have money to buy a talisman, even if it is an affordable pricing, but those that do, the fact that we talk about things on a phenomenal level, it means that those things are tended to also for the people that don't have the money to buy the protective talismans. And okay, and yes, it's not easy, and also when it comes to, you know, trust issues and all these things. Okay, and I'm sure that a lot of people that will listen to me and wonder, wait, am I working with them? Am I not working with them? And so on and so forth. And that's first of all, that's so relatable. That's so fucking relatable. Um, and and this is where us millennials work in. Just the fact that I can have an old bottle of Nordic soda that's by Coca-Cola here. Um, the same Coca-Cola that was selling us cocaine before us millennials were born, and that I have this with leftover drops from a perfume that was stolen from me, probably by people who didn't want the police to work in my favor when they were trying to traffic, torture me. And here is the thing: I could end up as dissected organs in some factory, and at the same time I could end up as this WEF politician that and like you never know what they plan what they plan to do, and I don't know which fate would be worse for me. um, and so the fact that I as a millennial have this thing to tap into, and and the leftover drops from something that I purchased, and was stolen from me by very likely people that tried to traffic me, um, or harm my soul or harvest my energy, um, is something that you know people in the 60s didn't have. And to have that, they would need to rape a couple of children in front of cameras, and then they wouldn't have it as water necessarily. They would have it as a talisman that, as Caitlin Koppel describes, would be like an organ implanted in their body. I know what the organ harvesting is. Okay, they wouldn't be able to take it on and off, or to use it when the time is calling for it. Um, and now all of my colleagues, shout out to Threads of Fate, that's also doing non-commercial talismans. I'm also doing non-commercial talismans, um, and Austin Kopek that brought together with Christopher Warnock. Christopher Warnock revived the art as talismans. Austin Kopek was as the husband of Caitlin Kopek. Um, and so brought also the teaching that would allow people with a lot of diligence, because it's an art that requires diligence to do those things themselves. And we have people like Gracia Tassio. By the way, I bought her a talisman course, and then my phone was stolen midway into learning. And she does that with the fasting and so on. But also we have people that perfect in the neurodivergent form of magic. Um, and knowing that not every talisman maker can fast for several weeks and get prepared and so on, because we're living in different times. That thing was not available just 20 years ago. The word neurodivergent wasn't there just, I think, half a decade ago. Um, I know of people in their 50s that are suddenly diagnosed as autistic, and they're like, oh my God, they have their child being diagnosed, and then they're diagnosed, and they're like, oh my God, that was something I was missing all my life. Even if it begins as a psychiatric tagging, it evolves into having the right to be a person. And and at the same time, us being able to have hands-on experience of discernment between the occult that saves our house from being burned and the occult that would burn down a house to get money under the do as thou wills. Now, naturally, that probably have triggered some boomers. Okay. I remember when I did my Beta Per Se talisman, there was an energy of a banker, and then I heard a younger woman telling me, don't let this person interfere in your energy. And I didn't let this person interfere, they just arrived. And they were angry, they were like, yeah, that's for the children. And they were like angry, and I didn't understand why, because I received the two lizards story. One lizard that said humanity is doomed, and one lizard that says humanity is saved, but the lizard that says humanity is doomed was faster than the other lizard. And that came about, and it may be that that person could have been considered a reptilian, so. um, and then, a lot, it drew the attention of a lot of billionaires and entrepreneurs. um, okay, because I was making certain pitches, um, and but they wanted to siphon the energy and take it to the inverted. Okay, they wanted basically those that practice the dark sorcery practice inverting the energy. Okay, they can, by the way, practice the transmutation of taking something dark and inverting it into something light, and some of them have even dabbled into that, or they did that by trying to siphon energy of other people to do that. But I think that they do have those innate abilities as they begin to recover from the rituals that were done to them. And I think that this is what the boomers are now realizing, that that venue is beginning to open, um, not with a lot of challenges. Okay, if I think about my Neptune sextile coincided with around the Saturn return. So for the Neptune trine, it's also the second Saturn return. And so we have the challenges of the second Saturn return, but there's also the Neptune trine. And there are a lot of venues that are opening up for people to authentically recover and heal. And again, the notion of authentically wanting to do something benefic, and transmuting the things that were basically a list of misguided beliefs, and I think Anneke Lucas tends to that a lot. And it's also a list of misguided beliefs around wealth. Okay, because and this is where the youngpreneurs need to plan for the boomers to sober up and begin to they need to plan for the boomers healing. And what do I mean by that? Because a lot of the misguided business JP Morgan scams, I ran into it as the IBM JP Morgan scams on the youngpreneurs when I was in high school, and some of the people that went with them ended up being the crypto suicide. Okay, in their Saturn returns and Saturn maturations, and some of them would have been around my age. Like if I would have gone in that trajectories, I would have been probably incredibly profitable with a lot of scams, then exposed by the very JP Morgan that built me, and then boom. Okay, so I wasn't even, when I was in high school, I wasn't even thinking that far. I was like, hey, I want to do something meaningful, like operating like a Gen Zer. And and that saved me in my Saturn return and Saturn maturation. But absolutely not easy. Now, um, those that went with those JP Morgan scams and probably were introduced by some boomers weren't planning for the boomers to heal, and that would mean that the boomers would want to abandon that business. And go out of extortion cults. Okay, so and this is why I say when people prepare a business model, and so on, they need to plan for the boomers to heal, because Neptune and Pluto are both about healing and transmuting. With Neptune, I'm still going through my Neptune square, so it's kind of considered miraculous healing of being with the void as something very ethereal, etheric around Neptune that I'm still learning to get to know. And it's very important for mastering the Neptune square for business, because when we talk about global businesses, Neptune is that thing of I was in high school. Neptune was going through my 12th house, and I did filmmaking, and I was acquainted with the unconditional love that goes into creating a project, and not knowing, with movies, it was kind of like Victorian birthing. You like 100 movies being written and maybe one, and so, but it goes to the ritual abuse, because the many, and I think Anneke Lucas, the many BIPOC children or that are being sacrificed as expendable children, that are not even considered to live, and as terrible as it is, it can be a good thing, bad thing, who knows, because those that are considered to live go through being extremely tortured. And no, it's not just seeing, it's also doing, and they will probably not have the stamina to rape a child had they not been raped. And Trudy Verstegen exposes, okay, the ritual rape of the people that are born into cloning lineages that are very wealthy lineages. Okay, the Medicis, for example, that funded both Galilei and the Pope, that argued with Galilei and Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, and so if we go with rituals of the Weld families where the expendable children are not even getting to live, and those that do are severely tortured and told that this is so that they will be strong to sustain. And I'm going without without judgment as to how the world was running up until now, because this is what they knew. They didn't know better. Okay, they thought that if they do that, then people would be kind of superhuman, and they didn't perhaps project or foresee the undermining that comes with that. And if you think about it in a local way, I had a friend that her father beat her up and took his anger on her, and he was thinking he's raising his daughter. And it took him a lot of, and that girl had to spend nights sleeping in stairways, even though she had a home supposedly, um, because they thought that it's okay to grow children like that. My own mother was like, hey, priding herself on not beating me when I was a child, and that's a very creepy experience as a child, because you realize that your parent is being entrepreneurial in not beating their child. By the way, one of the things that would come about when I would teach English would have a man, okay, an Arab man coming to meet me. So I said, okay, let's meet him at a public place and do. Um, and then he told me that he's an English teacher, and he wanted advice on how to teach children in preschool. It's like the first school that people go to. Okay, so elementary school. Yes, I know. That's Neptune. Like I forgot the word, even though I'm an English teacher. Um, and I knew nothing about teaching elementary school, because I became a private tutor because of the 40 students in one class, and I'm like, if I could do that, I could probably be a leader. But I took from what I learned about gamification, charisma, from Charisma on Command, Charlie, shout out to Charlie, the studies of gamification, Tim Ferriss, and I did a trial and error with him. It only took 3 meetings, and then he applied it, and he became the favorite student. And he taught in the Bedouin elementary schools, and he was the one teacher that wouldn't beat the children. Now he came to me saying, I don't want to beat the children. I need help on how to educate them." And so then he could go on to develop this method and have an entire school that's based on not beating the children. And he became their favorite teacher. And now, because he was an English teacher, all of them began to know English the best, because that's what he taught. So we did gamification, a contract with the children, taking into account that young children at third grade need um, to have exercises where they also, I don't know, jump on one leg to the board and back, and something that is taken into account, that they need to use their energy, and that it's always going to be like this boiling pot where you have to guard the flame. But you don't want third grade students sitting in silence, idle, and listening to the teacher. Um, okay, and when we allowed that a place for that, me coming with literally no background knowledge on how to teach children, and him actually applying that, um, and taking the physical effort to contend with those situations, that would send any sane person to the mental hospital, because the asylum is just more quiet, I guess. Um, um, but just thinking about the fact that I grew into an entrepreneurial a mother that wouldn't beat her child. In fact, the only time she went with raising her hand, it was not a Hitler-like move, because I stopped the hand and there was like a bowl of rage in front of me. I was like, what were you thinking to do with that hand? Like I was only threatening. I was like, okay, you shouldn't even be doing that. And that's a very big generational gap from people, if my grandfathers would take out the belt or the there's there's a story that runs in the family. My grandmother was a great cook, and she had this knife. Okay, now if my mother would piss her off, she would she would get angry, and then she would wave with the knife, which would send my mother to fits of laughter. For me, I didn't want to hit my husband with a pan. Uh, I guess I'm single. They're used to the wife beating them with the pan. And whenever they get drunk and violent, and I'm like, okay, but then he would have to not get violent. And currently is currently I'm single, but so think age gap relationships and that kind of stuff. Um, but this is also an understanding that those Neptune Pluto transits are healing transits, and the best advice I can give to young people thinking about the young people or youngpreneurs is plan for sovereignty, plan for the upper generations to heal, plan for the generations down the road um, to fight the fights that you were already almost dead, so that you didn't not that you didn't fight, but that you didn't get to achieve even more on. So Pluto Capricorns are the skibidi toilet, and they're aware of what's happening in the infrastructure or the tunnels or the CIA tunnels. Okay? Now think about a company that has several generations working in the company. One would be affiliated with the crimes of putting people in the tunnels as they try to heal from childhood abuse that they have gone through. One would be affiliated with the revolutions around coffee, while they still struggle to um, withstand the decision to drink coffee with um, goat milk, but it's still milk. And then there is the kettle issue. While they're dealing with the fact that people are being treated like cattle. and one would have an